Hello, church. Today we're going to talk about the story of Jesus and the fig tree. When I was a brand new believer and I came across this story, by the way, if you want to look it up, it is Mark 11:12 through 25. And as they're crossing the countryside, Jesus sees a fig tree that's covered in leaves, and that is usually an indication that it is bearing fruit. And he was in the mood for a sweet treat, I guess. And they approached the tree, and when he got to the tree, he saw that it had no fruit on it, and he cursed it. The next time they went past that area, Peter pointed out to Jesus that the fig tree was dead. It was completely dried up, dead as a doornail. And I thought, what an odd story that the poor fig tree. Um, why did Jesus kill that fig tree? Well, later in within that story I told you about, again it's Mark 11:12 through 25. It talks about him going to the temple and fabricating a whip because in fact he had heard ahead of time that vendors were manipulating people in the courtyard of the temple where money needed to be exchanged for common money to be used for the sale of merchandise, and they were fleecing people, charging them an exorbitant rate to change the currency into the currency that was needed. And so Jesus, walks in and looks around, and he goes off and fabricates a whip, and then he kicks all these money changers out of the temple, uh, and saying, "What are you doing? This is supposed to be a house of worship, and you changed it into a den of thieves." And so the whole story of the fig tree, which of course Jesus knew, was a precursor, a parable, if you will, a visual parable of what he was going to do in the temple. The temple looked great on the outside like the fig tree, but when he walked in, um, it wasn't bearing fruit. It had a bunch of money grubbing, greedy guys in there that were fleecing people uh, to make an exorbitant profit. So Jesus Jesus did this so many times, and a lot of people never really understood his parables. So he would try and illustrate something in a story to show the application of things he would preach. And I loved the way he did that. And once I understood that, of course, I came to understand the story. And sometimes when we look at something from the outside, depending on what our mindset is, we don't necessarily understand what's going on. So that is one of the examples in the Bible that when Jesus did something that I thought was odd or not normally like him, I have now learned to reserve judgment until I understand why he said something a certain way, or why he did something in a certain way. And sure enough, every time that has happened, there is an explanation uh, that usually follows that illustration. And another good example of what I'm talking about, that since he always knew everything ahead of time, he knew that fig tree wasn't going to have any fruit on it, just like the temple uh, didn't have any good fruit in it because of these goofy vendors. And one time he saved he restored a blind man's sight, and this wasn't just some guy he happened to run into who was blind. This guy was blind from the get-go, from birth. He never had any sight. And Jesus picked him specifically so that everyone in the town knew who he was. And um, people speculated about what happened in that family, that this guy was born blind, who sinned, who did what, and it had nothing to do with that. Later, Jesus would explain that this man's predicament was used by Jesus to glorify God through the miracle of restoring his sight. So it's interesting how when we read something about Jesus, getting back to the fig tree, where it just seems like an incidental moment, it was all planned out. This whole thing is what led up to him going into the temple and calling all these greedy people out and kicking them out of the temple. The reason I'm trying to point this out is when you do come across things like this in the Bible, do question it, but do your research. Read a little bit ahead of that passage, read a little bit after that passage. Maybe check your Bible references, maybe check your study notes if you have a study Bible, or ask a deacon or someone else who you think might be more knowledgeable about such passages in the Bible, and you will always find out that Jesus never did anything at random. Everything he did had a rhyme to his reason, so to speak. And this is just one of those beautiful stories where everything comes together, and we realize through parables, in this case a visual parable of the fig tree, that if you're a Christian, you're expected to bear fruit. You are an emissary, you are an ambassador of Jesus Christ, and he wants to see that fruit. I hope you have a great day, church. I love you.